The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Grand Hotel shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers, an atmosphere of luxury and purpose filling the air. The annual charity gala was a gathering of the nation's elite, business magnates, Hollywood. Stars and seasoned journalists, all there to support a foundation dedicated to uplifting underprivileged youth. The hum of conversation mixed with the soft notes of a string quartet, creating an ambiance of elegance and anticipation. Seated towards the back, away from the direct attention of the crowd, was 18-year-old Barron. Tall, composed and observant, he was a stark contrast to the many guests who thrived in the limelight. He had been invited by a family friend, a quiet effort to introduce him to a different social sphere. Unlike those around him who reveled in the attention, Barron was content to watch, his blue eyes scanning the room with quiet curiosity. As the night progressed, the anticipation in the air sharpened. The evening's keynote speaker, a renowned journalist celebrated in liberal media circles, was about to take the stage. Known for their sharp wit and unfiltered commentary, they had built a reputation on challenging social norms. Some viewed them as a beacon of truth, while others saw them as a provocateur who thrived on controversy. Tonight, their speech promised to ignite thought and conversation. As the MC announced their name, a hush fell over the crowd. Glasses were set down, whispered conversations ceased, and all attention turned to the stage. The journalist walked up with practiced confidence, dressed in a sleek black suit, their smile calculated and poised. The applause was polite yet tinged with expectation. Would they push boundaries tonight? Would they court controversy as they so often did? The grand ballroom, once filled with warmth and laughter, now felt heavy with tension. The journalist had expertly steered their speech from light-hearted banter to sharp critiques, poking fun at politicians, celebrities, and cultural figures. The audience, initially engaged, had begun to shift uncomfortably in their seats as the jabs became more pointed. Then the inevitable happened. Donald Trump had become the next target. The journalist's quip about his signature tan earned scattered chuckles, but the crowd's laughter was no longer unanimous. Some guests exchanged wary glances, others sipped their champagne in an effort to appear indifferent. Barron, seated quietly at the back, remained expressionless. If the journalist noticed him, they gave no indication. Until they did. With a dramatic pause, the journalist smirked and pivoted. And of course, we can't forget his most overlooked legacy, the next generation. The air in the room shifted. Instantly, Barron's name was spoken not as a casual mention, but as the punchline to a joke. Imagine growing up in a golden tower, surrounded by marble everything, while the rest of us are just trying to survive Monday mornings. That must have been character building. A few uneasy chuckles escaped from the audience, but for the most part, silence swallowed the room. The atmosphere of camaraderie had been shattered, replaced by an awkward stillness. All eyes turned toward Barron, the young man who had spent most of the evening as a quiet observer, now thrust into the center of attention. The journalist's attempt at humor had backfired. But Barron? He did not shift. He did not frown, scoff, or show the slightest hint of discomfort. Instead, he remained utterly calm. The tension in the grand ballroom had transformed into something almost tangible, thick in the air like an approaching storm. All eyes remained locked on Barron, the young man who had been thrust into the spotlight against his will. Yet, instead of retreating, he had risen, literally and figuratively. The journalist, who had moments ago exuded confidence, now stood frozen. Their smirk had disappeared, replaced by something closer to uncertainty. The crowd, unsure of what was about to unfold, sat in rigid silence, watching as Barron moved with deliberate precision. As he approached the stage, his posture remained impeccable, his movement slow, calculated, and unwavering. It wasn't the arrogance of privilege nor the stiffness of intimidation. It was control. The journalist, standing at the podium, gripped the microphone a little tighter. Their attempt at humor had backfired, the weight of their words now hanging in the air like an unfinished sentence. The room that had once laughed now held its breath. Then Barron stopped at the edge of the stage. For a moment he simply stood there looking up, not with anger, not with arrogance, but with something even more unsettling: composure. He didn't fidget, didn't scan the crowd for approval. He merely observed. The journalist, sensing the gravity of the moment, cleared their throat. "Well," they said, attempting to regain control, "I suppose I should say it's an honor." But before they could finish, Barron moved again. With the same deliberate grace, he reached up, not for the microphone, not to point, not to gesture, but to adjust the cuff of his sleeve. A small action, almost insignificant. Yet in that instant, it was the most powerful thing in the room, because Barron wasn't rattled, because Barron wasn't playing their game. The silence deepened. The journalist hesitated, as if trying to decide whether to backpedal, to apologize, or to double down. But before they could choose, Barron did something even more unexpected. He turned, not toward the journalist, but toward the audience. And then, without a single word, he walked away. The ballroom, once filled with the hum of conversation and laughter, now felt like a different world entirely. Barron stood just feet from the stage, his presence alone commanding the room in a way no scripted speech ever could. The journalist, once brimming with confidence, now gripped the podium as if searching for stability. The crowd, frozen in place, hung onto every word. "Thank you for your insight." His voice was calm, unwavering. There was no sarcasm, no venom, just an unnerving sense of control. It was the kind of composure that didn't need theatrics to make an impact. And it did. The journalist blinked, clearly thrown off by the unexpected response. "I've grown up watching people make assumptions about me, my family, and my life," Barron continued. His gaze was locked onto the journalist, not with challenge, but with something more piercing: understanding. It's almost become a game to some, a way to fill in the gaps when they don't know the full story. "And I get it. We're public figures. It comes with the territory." There was no denying the weight of his words. Even those who had earlier chuckled at the jokes now sat motionless, their amusement replaced by something else: reflection. Then his tone shifted, just slightly. A new intensity crept in. But there's something important that often gets overlooked. The silence stretched. Barron's presence, so still yet so powerful, filled the space between his words. Behind every headline, behind every punchline, there's a human being, someone with their own struggles, their own dreams, their own story. "You may think you know me because of who my father is, but you don't. Not really." The journalist, who had thrived on making others the subject of their commentary, suddenly found themselves as the subject. And not through insults or retaliation, but through the undeniable truth of Barron's words. Barron took a step forward, not aggressive, but deliberate. "What I've learned," he said, pausing just long enough for his message to land, "is that respect doesn't have to be earned. It should be given freely, especially when you don't know someone's story." A ripple ran through the audience. Some shifted in their seats. Others exchanged glances, as if suddenly aware of how their own words and judgments had contributed to the culture of tearing others down. Barron turned slightly, no longer just addressing the journalist, but the entire room. "We live in a time where it's easy to tear each other down," he said, his voice steady, carrying a quiet conviction that felt far beyond his years. And in that moment, it was no longer about him. The weight of Barron's words still hung in the air, his final statement resonating in a way that transcended the moment. Words have power. They can hurt, or they can heal. They can divide, or they can unite. and I think we could all use a little more of the latter." The room remained motionless, captivated by the depth of what had just unfolded. It was no longer about politics, about legacy, or about the expectations placed upon a name. It was about something far greater, the responsibility of words, the unseen weight of assumptions, and the quiet power of dignity. Barron took a measured step back, his gaze meeting the journalists once more. But there was no triumph, no smugness, only a simple offering of truth. "I hope this gives you something to think about." His voice was soft, yet it cut through the silence sharper than any insult could. Then, without another word, he turned and walked back to his seat. The soft rhythm of his footsteps echoed in the stillness, each step a quiet punctuation mark to the lesson he had just delivered. No one moved, no one spoke. The journalist once, the master of the room, stood frozen, their earlier confidence crumbling under the sheer gravity of the moment. Then the applause began, a single clap at first, then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was on its feet, erupting into a thunderous standing ovation. The applause wasn't just for Barron. It was for what he had just represented. Some clapped with admiration, others with a quiet sense of redemption, as if acknowledging the unspoken discomfort that had settled over the room minutes earlier. At the podium, the journalist attempted a smile, a weak attempt at reclaiming control, but it was too late. The moment no longer belonged to them. Barron, now seated, did not react to the applause. He didn't bask in the validation, nor did he seek to prolong the moment. He remained composed, offering only a slight nod of acknowledgement. It wasn't about humility. It wasn't about proving a point. It was simply the quiet assurance of someone who had said exactly what needed to be said. Nothing more, nothing less. But the moment did not end there. Within hours, it had spread far beyond the grand ballroom. Attendees, unable to resist capturing history as it happened, had discreetly recorded Barron's words on their phones. By the time dawn broke, social media had already turned the evening into a defining cultural event. The ripples from that night continued to spread. The moment had passed, but the conversation it sparked refused to fade. The journalist, now at the center of a media storm, issued a public apology the next day. Comedy and commentary are powerful tools, but they must be wielded responsibly. "Last night, I crossed a line, and I apologized to Baron Trump for my remarks. Yet, the apology did little to settle the debate. Some saw it as genuine, a much-needed acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Others dismissed it as damage control, a hollow attempt to regain public favor. Talk shows, podcasts, and online forums dissected the incident from every angle. Some praised Barron's speech as a reminder that civility still had a place in public discourse. Others saw it as a necessary reckoning, proof that even public figures, especially young ones, deserve respect. For Barron himself, however, the world's reaction seemed irrelevant. He went back to his life as if nothing had happened. Those close to him said he barely acknowledged the media frenzy. He wasn't interested in the debates, the headlines, or the trending hashtags. Instead, he focused on what he always had: his studies, his interests, his future. But while Barron moved on, the world did not. The lessons from that night lingered, seeping into conversations in ways no one could have predicted. At dinner tables, classrooms, and workplaces, people talked, not just about the drama, but about what it revealed. His response had struck a chord. In an era where outrage was the norm, where instant reactions often overshadowed thoughtful reflection, his choice to meet the moment with dignity felt like an anomaly. It made people pause. It made them ask, how often do we stop before reacting? How often do we choose words that build instead of words that destroy? For some, the incident was a wake-up call. It was easy to forget. in the noise of social media and political discourse, that behind every headline, every joke, every viral moment, there were real people. The journalist's comments had been more than just humor. They had been a reminder of how easily words could cut. Parents used Barron's response as a lesson for their children. Videos of his speech found their way into classrooms, sparking discussions on respect, empathy, and the power of restraint. Teachers used it to challenge students. What would you have done in his place? The journalist's mistake faded, but Barron's response remained, not because it was loud, not because it was dramatic, but because it was different, because in a world where everyone was shouting, he had chosen to speak in a way that made people listen. And so, the night became more than just an uncomfortable moment at a gala. It became a lesson in grace, a lesson in dignity, a lesson in the power of standing up for oneself without tearing others down. Teachers praised Barron's ability to navigate conflict with poise, using his response as a case study in communication and emotional intelligence. In classrooms across the country, students were encouraged to think critically about how they handle difficult situations. Do you fight fire with fire? Or do you choose a different path, one that requires more strength, more control, more wisdom? Yet, perhaps the most profound impact of the night was its ability to bridge divides, if only for a moment. People from all walks of life, regardless of political beliefs, found themselves united in admiration. Not because of his last name, not because of his father's legacy, but because of who he was in that moment. A young man who reminded the world that respect and empathy still have a place, even in the face of provocation. By choosing to respond with kindness and integrity, Barron showed that dignity is a choice. His actions proved that no matter how heated, no matter how polarized a situation may become, there is always power in choosing to rise above.